It's my pleasure to officially welcome everyone to what I'm sure will be a very insightful conversation with Nicole Marra, founder and CEO at Fixer Advisory Group, and Jelina Saliu, president of Safely. And they're also joined by Brooke Boulin, the COO at the Fixer Advisory Group as well, who is going to be paying special attention to questions coming in the chat and make sure that they go either to Nicole or to Jelina, based on the question. But before we dive in, per usual, a quick word about the fourth effect. I know a vast majority of the faces here are familiar. You already know that we are where high impact startups and visionary executives connect to drive growth, innovation, and boardroom success. We are matching startups with game-changing advisors, diverse board candidates, and investors to help them scale efficiently and effectively. And for executives, we are a gateway to break into the board candidate pipeline, to gain valuable advisory experience, and really step into that world of early stage investing, into an entrepreneurial ecosystem that sometimes is elusive and hard to break into when you are not already in the space. So if you are not currently a premium member in the fourth effect, and what that means is that you have given us your credit card and you are paying a fee. If that is not you, you might not be a premium member, with the exception of if you've been with us forever. There are some of you that are in a different category, but we really encourage you to consider testing out premium membership. Start your free trial, which you can do on our website. We'll share the link. It's the first month. There is no charge. You have full access. We want you to really see what we're doing and figure out if it's a resource for you. Right now, we have over 2,000 amazing executives. There's also over 800, just under 900 pre-seed through Series A startups that are actively looking to build out their advisory boards, and some of them are starting to build out their governing boards. Many of them are fundraising, or if they're not today, they will be tomorrow. So there's a lot of incredible investment opportunities. Sometimes those things align or overlap. And we also have a really robust investment community. So there's we have now over 200 LPs, angels, and GPs. And there's also close to 30 venture funds that are, affiliate partner funds. So they're keeping their eyes on the startups that are fundraising as well. And really exciting news on that front, we are launching our official Fourth Effect Angels. So we can invest directly in the startups in the Fourth Effect that are paying attention, that are actually, making use of their advisory boards, and it's really helping them scale. Well, we want to invest in you. So we're really excited about that. And I think that's all I had to say on that front. We will be sharing links to a platform tour. If you want to learn more about what I'm saying, like I said, we'll share the link to sign up and start your free trial as a premium member if you haven't already done that. We'll also share some other links for other things happening, ways to follow us and stay connected. So, and then for members, just remember every Friday, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m., Kat, myself, and Sarah, we are all at your disposal. So if you have not popped in for office hours and you're a longtime member, you have questions, come and let us help you make sure that we're bringing you value. Okay, so now we're gonna get to the point of today, which I know everyone is here for. And so excited to see the crowd has gotten bigger. With that, let me now turn the stage over to Nicole and Jelina so they can introduce themselves properly. And I will let you take it away.
Thanks so much, Breen. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. We're excited to kick off a great conversation about CPG trends, best practices, and financials and other aspects of the industry. And so just for a quick intro, my name is Nicole Marra. I founded Fixer Advisory Group in 2020. I'm a lawyer by training. I've been a lawyer for about 30 years. And right before launching Fixer Advisory Group, I was the general counsel for Gucci in North America for 10 years. And the concept behind Fixer Advisory Group is really to be a group of experts for legal advice, fractional general counsel kind of work, as well as management consulting. So we are a team based in New York, and we provide support to consumer, retail, health and wellness, beauty, et cetera, brands that need help with their operations. Everything from legal to HR to real estate to finance, compliance, and a lot more. And that is really, where we come together. And Jelina is our CFO, as well as she has some other hats. So I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Lisa, I love your butterflies in the wall. I wanted to say that as you log in. So sweet. My name is Jelina. My mission really in work is to help small businesses. I love small businesses. I love all of how founders think about coming up with an idea and bringing it to life. And where my secret power comes in is I love partnering up with the founders and bringing the financial statements, which is the backbone of small business growth as well as success. During my time, I've been part of various brands. One of them called The Laundress. It sold to Unilever in 2019. And also another brand called Safely. So a lot of CPG and service brands have gone through my mind and fingertips.
Okay, so that's a little bit about us. Let's kick it off, Jelina, shall we?
Yes.
Okay, so we thought we would start off by talking about what are some of the major trends in the CPG industry and what we see happening for 25. And so I'm going to ask Jelina to kick it off, talking a little bit about one of the big trends we see, which is the use of AI and machine learning.
Yeah, so over the past year, I've had a real pleasure in really watching AI come to life. When you think about CPG, the number one thing about CPG is economies of scale. So the more things you could sell, the more money you make, the larger your valuation is. With economies of scale, there's a ton of EDI, right, or order processing, or checking on inventory, understanding how many weeks of inventory you have left, what you need to sell. And a lot of AI tools have come this way to be able to really process these everyday tasks. And one of them that I've had a pleasure of working with is called, and I could put it on the chat as well, is called UiPath. And it's literally an AI tool that follows you around and understands how you're doing the work. And after many weeks or months, it is able to do various tasks that your business needs.
Any questions or want more info on that? If not, we can just continue on. We can always think of them later. So the AI, uses are many, and everyone's talking about it. And I think that, to Jelina's point, the creating efficiencies and finding ways of automating more processes is helpful in so many ways. Some of the other ways that I'm seeing AI being used certainly is around improving customer experience, customization, inventory management. So the learning and the tools that are available are being implemented everywhere. I think that yeah, we can share a link, Jelina, right?
Yeah.
We can share a link to the tool. I think that it's also really interesting to see how it's being used for marketing, for creating content. So I think creating content is going to just change completely now going forward, if you haven't already found that it has. But in terms of laboring over, how to come up with even social media posts or advertising copy or things like that, I mean, it's still going to need your personal touch, but we're really seeing an incredible uptick in using ChatGPT and some of the other AI platforms for that. So that's one. Another one that I want to touch on is supply chain. I think it's on everybody's mind right now as we go into a new administration starting next week, as we think about some of the challenges we've had over the last several years with all kinds of macro disruptions and changes. So looking at creating a resilient supply chain, one that is flexible, where you have the ability to produce closer to home, produce on demand, which gets into sustainability, which is a little bit of a preview into where we're going to go next for a few minutes, but really looking at flexible production, nearshoring, onshoring, being mindful and cognizant of what's coming down the pike and where you've maybe experienced shipping issues or other production issues, and being able to set expectations for your customer. Especially so that you're able to meet delivery deadlines for orders that you're fulfilling in the wholesale world. As we know, those can get canceled. You want to get in your delivery window. And so, that also leads me a little bit, as I touched on, to talk about circular retail and sustainability. I think the customer we're seeing is looking more and more for options that are sustainable for sure. And not only is it the customer that's demanding it, but there's legislation that's going on that we're keeping an eye on that's going to be changing rapidly. So, there are increased and different requirements that are going to be happening around labeling, around ingredients. And Jelina, I think you had a good example about Target, probably.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we see a lot of times, not only are actual brands coming up with how they want to treat the environment or what product they want to make, but also the spaces where they're selling retailers. So Target, for example, has mentioned and has made it a requirement that by 2030, you have to have 100% PCR bottle that shows up into a Target shelf, which means that if you're thinking through purchasing your inventory, you have to think ahead, making sure that by you need to start resourcing and sourcing a PCR bottle that's 100% by most likely 2029. So when 2030 comes along, you are in because you need to be compliant as soon as that fiscal year hits. But Walmart has the same thing, Kroger and various big retailers.
Before I see there's a question from Melissa in the chat. Jelina, what specific tasks have you, before we move on to talk about other things, just going back to AI for a minute, what specific tasks do you think are most useful to be replaced with AI that you've seen?
The way I would think about it is take a step back and see what are the tasks that are being performed at your brand by your team members that are almost like in this repetitive stage and are preventing you from growing. So when I think of a CPG, it's always order processing and inventory management. And order processing, ensuring that when orders flow through that EDI step, and checking the inventory to release them so they can go to get processed in the warehouse, that actually requires, we think it requires that human touch. But if you can throw in this UI path, which I've seen work, and it's working really well, it almost it will take over that path, and then you could free up that time to actually focus on growing that customer and seeing what else they need to order, how else can you grow that business. And then the second one, which a lot of our marketing team has used, which Nicole mentioned, is really writing up a lot of the marketing projects or marketing ideas, and it's quite good, actually. It's really good. I read it and it's really, really, really good. But I would think what is it, something that's you're doing over and over and over again that's stopping you from growing your business and going out there to get more sales?
I'm curious to know, in our audience, is there anyone who's already using AI in any of the ways that Jelina mentioned? Any feedback from you? We definitely want to have this be an open and interactive discussion. Yeah, Megan.
In addition to the marketing, I know a bunch of even like Series A founders where it hasn't replaced their HR teams, but like a lot of the communications copy that you would probably have a full-time person on, and also like job descriptions. I would say I mean, it takes a human just to double check it because a lot of it's quite generic, but I've literally worked with people who like all of their communications are first done on ChatGPT, and I've worked with companies like far-fetched competitors where like exactly like you were saying, like the marketing copy, again, like it sounded like not a native English speaker at first, so you've got to correct
Yeah.
it, but the foundation is like okay, it's like 60% there. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's pretty incredible. And, just I don't run a CPG company, but in our business, in our consulting world, we've started using it a lot more, particularly for marketing. And just a year and a half ago, maybe, I think I was working with it a little bit. I'm not super tech savvy, but it was like completely clunky and not easy to use. And now it's like you're having a conversation with someone, which is kind of crazy. And of course you have to check it. And of course it's not going to be able to make judgment calls or, but I do find that it's really helpful for lists, for making sure that you're just checking yourself on topics that you might not want to forget about something, putting it in there as a quick check, definitely saving incredible amounts of time, I think, on certain tasks. Anyone else?
I just have to say something. We had at our annual summit, we had the head of education from OpenAI speak, and it was 20 minutes of just jaw droppers. But one of the things she said, she was like, if you are a seed stage founder and ChatGPT is not one of your co-founders, you're doing something wrong. And as a seed stage startup founder, I absolutely feel that way. So like I probably spend on average 4 to 5 hours a day interacting with ChatGPT.
It's so true. It's fascinating. And as Melissa, go ahead.
So I was just going to share as having experience with, but I don't have a company, so not using it for my company, but I've seen some great AI tools for customer prospecting in CPG that I think are really useful, especially in early stages when you're kind of challenged on having a really robust sales teams to support you. Like Peel has been one of them that I saw that was really good, go through Techstars. But I think that's a very helpful tool as well.
I feel like it's great to kind of just be hearing not only from us, but from your peers about who's using what and how it's working. So just to pivot a little bit to continue the conversation, we want to talk about, in light of these trends, in light of where everything's going, the importance of sound financial and legal planning to ensure that you're set up for success. So Jelina, our financial expert, is going to start off talking about what you need to be focused on and why it's so important from a financial planning perspective.
Yes, I'm also putting on the chat. I forgot to say there is this other company called theofficial.ai, where if you have a product that you usually spend a lot of money taking photos of, you could send the product to them and they take measurements. And then you could say, I want this to be next to a Christmas tree, or I want this to be in a sink. And they essentially will make that image come to life. So I'll put that on the chat as well. And then I'll start with the sound financial planning. So when we think through last year, we came from a really, really robust COVID growth. And last year was the year where we thought that the fiscal growth was going to be the same as the previous years. And a lot of businesses did not see that. So when we think about financial planning, it's really, really important to ensure that the first step that's done is really comparing not only yourself last year, but also comparing yourself to the competition and seeing how the competition is growing. because you will have two levers to pull. And that's really important. Typically in a CPG space, we call that quartile analysis, which you can get. So if you're selling, let's say, soap, or you're selling a cleanser, and you know who your competition is on the CPG space, you could compare your sales data and your growth versus how that competitor has increased or grown. The second piece, once you know what your actualized sales will be, it's really important to make sure that you have them anywhere between 6 to 7% off as the year is going by, because if they're 20% off, then your overall expenses are going to be 20% off as well, which will lead to a larger loss that you won't be able to sustain. So thinking through, sound financial planning, ensuring that your sales are actualized, and ensuring that you're looking through how your forecast is built. And secondly, making sure that you're building your expenses to that actualized forecast is really important.
Any
Any
questions?
Go ahead, Krishna.
I can't find both the mute button and the raise hand button. So I'm just curious where you're getting benchmark data, especially for private companies where it's not necessarily easy to get the data.
Yeah, so let's say for example, if you're selling your product on Amazon and you have an Amazon agency, you can work with your Amazon agency to build up these reports on monthly basis, or you could do it yourself. Like if you go on Amazon now and you look at your competition, it will say 1,000 units sold last month, and you kind of key that into your data. But the agency can do that for you as well, because they're using an AI tool to pull the information. If you're selling your product at a retailer such as Target or Kroger or Walmart, and you're using a broker, the broker will give you that information through their through the database that they use. So it's really important to put your people, your brokers, your agencies to work to be able to find you the data, because they're the best tool. They're the best to be able to tell you what the actual growth will be. So when you're building your forecast, you want to ask everybody that's really honing into making making the sales to weigh in and really get it right.
Anyone
But
else?
the
Yeah.
Amazon, make sure you do it monthly, because Amazon, the numbers disappear. Jeff Bezos, he's got it all figured out. So you have to, you got to check it in and you got to log it in.
I'm curious to know in our group today, how many of you are running CPG brands right now? If you can pop it in the chat or just raise your hand or.
So I'm developing one. I thought we'd be launched, but then the manufacturer messed up. So we're restarting. So it is CPG, but yeah.
That happens all the times, Lisa. It's better to happen before you launch than after you launch, and then you have a lot of OSs where then everyone gets mad because their shelves are empty.
Great. I see everyone's popping in the chat. I just think it's really helpful to know if you're running one, if where you're at, if you're investing. Great. So in addition to sort of that fundamental financial planning, especially, as you're looking at what's coming up next year, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the legal piece of all of this. Do you guys have, you can say if you have lawyers, if you're working with lawyers, how experienced you are with that or not. But what happens a lot of times when founders are forming new companies is, one of the biggest things and one of the most simple things is the name. And I don't know if any of you have struggled with this, but naming your company, getting and protecting that name, and getting it trademarked, can be really frustrating and tricky. So that's something that I'm happy to speak more about, but just overall, as you're going through this process, making sure that the IP that you have is really, that you understand what intellectual property is, that you understand how to protect it, formulas, copy, things that are subject to copyright, which might be materials that you're creating about your product, and the name of your product, as well as the name of different potential lines within your product line. So that's something that we focus on as a really important piece, because to Jelina's point, you want to find out if you have issues with that before you launch, as opposed to after you've launched and then you have to change the name. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but really very important. And there's a lot of nuances to the trademark piece. So sometimes there are people out there who already have the name, but they have it in a different category. There might be issues with getting it registered, and you can proceed whether you can or can't get it registered, but there's different issues as it may relate to valuation and things like that. It's one of your biggest it's like your biggest asset is your IP. So very important to be thinking about that upfront. And then, as you go forward with your product, making sure that your labeling is compliant, making sure that your formulas are containing product that's compliant, that your advertising and claims are compliant and truthful, and all of that can be daunting. There are special experts who can help you with that. The regulations are always changing. It depends on where you're distributing. It depends on which countries you're distributing if you're outside of the US. And so getting that right is important. I know, Jelina, you're nodding, because also, you'll have a problem if it's not right with your account, right?
That's right. That's right. Because you don't want to be, Lisa, after you worked so hard in getting the product from the manufacturer, to then having to do a recall because it was not compliant with, some state legislation.
Oh,
Or have-
state, FCC, all of the things, right? So
Yeah, all of
yeah, I'm
it.
kind of grateful because, you did it before you actually got to launch, or we did, right? We got the kick in the butt, so.
There you go.
Getting a kick in the butt before you launch is not necessarily a bad thing. It's like we can be grateful for these experiences. In terms of formulas, understanding what you own, what you're licensing, what you might be licensing from a fragrance manufacturer, for example, and what your rights are. So entering into contracts with vendors, entering into contracts with your wholesale partners, entering into contracts with consultants and employees, what that looks like. And I don't know if anyone is managing a team here, but that's definitely an area where there can be a lot of pitfalls. There are a lot of sort of urban legends, let's say, about what makes the difference between a contractor and an employee, or someone who's entitled to overtime versus not entitled to overtime. These kinds of things can be tricky if you're not sort of having just access to someone who's an expert around them, and knowing where you can negotiate and what you want to be careful about. One of the things that we often talk to founders about is understanding things like termination rights in contracts. You might be super excited about something at one point to be entering into, and then find out a year later you want to get out of it, and it's actually a 3-year contract and you can't, or there's a significant penalty. And Jelina and I were talking about this when this comes up in real world practice, what happens from the financial side.
Yes, exactly. We, as CFOs and as advisors to the businesses that you guys are advising, when budgets are stretched or you're adjusting them, there's, the CFO looks at it and is like, okay, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut this, and we're going to cut this. But reviewing those contracts before you start making those decisions is really important, because you don't know how long they are. And it's not as easy as cutting it, because if you're cutting something, you may have to pay something in advance, and it just actually ruined your cash flow versus fixing it.
So one of the other things we wanted to talk about, I'm going to bump it back to you, Jelina, was about thinking about, from a financial planning perspective, looking at your sales channels and making sure, as you're doing your forecasting, what sales channels, what's happening in the different sales channels right now. What are you seeing? What are your recommendations?
Yes. When I think through, kind of taking a step back, when I started doing a lot of my work, it was during 2008 where we had the Great Recession. And during 2008, you had to be really clever in being able to come up with real sales strategies, to be able to push your product and ensure that customers saw it and bought it. And as we think through fiscal year 2025, it almost reminds me a little bit about how 2008 was, in a sense of costs per client has become really expensive. Buying a customer is really expensive. In the CPG world, it could be the death by 1,000 cuts. So ensuring that you're putting your actual sales channels in a way that you're spreading your profit margin to where you have a wholesale, a D2C, and you have some actual partnerships where everyone is, all of these sales channels are working to give the halo effect to the brand, so everyone can know about it, is really important. But it's also important to ensure that that product, Lisa, that you're making in the factory has the right profit margin that can sustain all these sales channels. Because if one sales channel is selling more than the other and the profit margin is not keystone to where it's built to have retail, wholesale, and distributor, you can be in a position where you're selling so much, but you're still not turning a profit, and you're like, what's happening? So again, it's important to have your sales channels to be multifaceted, but it's also important to ensure that your margin is following that multifaceted sales channel.
Thanks. Are there any questions about any of the topics we just touched on? Okay. Cool. Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is how you, as a founder, or as some of you indicate, are advising founders or thinking about investing in CPG brands, how you can, as a founder yourself or as an advisor, be sure that you are ensure that you're making sure that everything, all of these topics and many more are covered. So as at Fixer, we spend most of our time advising companies that are a little bit further along in terms of their development process. And what we have found is that earlier stage businesses really need the kind of help that we provide to slightly later stage companies, and that it's been very important to us to figure out a way to serve them and to serve you guys. And so what we've done, which I want to talk a little bit about, is we've created something called a founders program that really takes the founder through all of the different areas that we provide consulting services for, and makes sure that you're able to get the very hands-on, actionable support in shoring up everything from your strategy to your finance to your legal position to HR to fundraising, your sales strategy, et cetera. So I wanted to just take a couple minutes to share that with you, to share some information about it with you. We'll pop some of the information in the chat, but I'm just going to share my screen for a moment. And just quickly run through our program, which is called Powered by Fixer. We like to think of ourselves as empowering brands. And this is really the profile of the companies that we're looking for to participate in this program. It's a very small program. It's very bespoke. It's about to start in March, early March. Late February is our kickoff event, and then we started in March. And we are looking for, scale-ups, brands that have launched, that are looking at scaling, and are kind of in this early stage. And so that's really the industries that we're focusing on. So it could be a fairly broad range, but the group will be certainly less than 15, maybe even less than 10. So a very small, intimate group of founders. The program runs for 6 months. So it's going to be run by an incredible group of experts. These are some of the brands that we work with. And many more, but we just sort of like to share that because we've spent a lot of time working in this industry. Here are some of the program leaders. And again, we'll share a link to this, but there are experts from our team at Fixer, as well as our network of experts that we bring in to support. So Jelina is on here. You'll see her. She is running the finance course. So you can see that she has a tremendous amount of expertise in that. And for example, in the finance course, you'll come away with an incredible 5-year roadmap for financial planning. And really be able to understand what your sales plan and what your margins are. I'll let Jelina speak to it maybe briefly, but it's pretty cool. And it allows you to speak also with investors who know companies that you may think have potential but need to be shored up a bit and have additional foundation. This is a great program for them. These are the 6 courses that we are providing over the course of 6 months. So strategy and leadership, we think it's really important to start with making sure that you understand who your company is, what your North Star is, who you are, how you want to show up as a leader. It's not just about producing product. Success really does start with being able to authentically know who you are and who you want to be to your customer. I mentioned the financial planning, sales, distribution, and marketing, obviously a huge piece of this, and some of the topics that we touched on. People and culture, how do you build your team? Who do you want to be to your team? Who's most important to hire? Maybe as you build your financial plan, you can see that you can hire 1 person, or you can get 3 consultants, or whatever it might be. Who should they be? Who are the people that are going to give you the most return on investment? Some of the topics that I talked about referenced a little bit, the legal and compliance and IP playbook. We go through all of the specific questions that you have about your business and really set you up for success there. And then the last one is creating a fundraising pitch. So to the extent that you're looking for investment, whether it's on the lending side or on the equity side, we make sure that you come out with a really excellent pitch deck. So that's really just some information about this program to the extent that this is appropriate, interesting. For those of you who are investors and advisors, we'd also love to talk with you. We're going to be, working with an incredible cohort. We're close to wrapping it up in terms of selection. That'll happen at the end of this month. We are going to have lots of opportunities for people to work with our brands, to meet our brands. There's going to be a huge event at the end of the program coming up this fall, where we have all of our founders showcasing their products and their companies and being able to speak and meet with investors and advisors. Everyone in the program has a mentor who's an industry expert. And this is really what we're looking at. It's going to be virtual live sessions once a week for 6 months. And that's about it. This is the timeline that we are looking at. And the cost is, we're asking for $10,000 plus 1% equity for brands that feel like this is right for them and that we think is right for us. And that's really what I wanted to share with you. We'll pop the information in the chat in case anyone wants more. But that's really what we wanted to talk about today. And we're happy we have a few more minutes for sure if we want to dive into specific questions that you have about your business. It looks like somebody asked, how do you validate the supplier channel suppliers versus what they say they can do? Lisa?
So that lovely manufacturer said, we can do it all, is why I'm asking. And yet, how do you validate that in reality so that, you see the results that they promise?
Yes, typically, as you're interviewing a supplier and you obviously do the in-house visit, it's really customary to sit down and prepare a WO or an SNOP, so ways of working. And at that process, they owe you this information. How many days does it take to run 10,000 units? How many days does it take to fill 10,000 units? so you could actually put it into your spreadsheet. So if any of your customers want to buy 50,000 units, you're able to tell them, oh, it takes me like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, etc. And as they tell you this information, you put it on the spreadsheet, and then Nicole is going to jump in here, but then you build a contract, right? And you protect yourself. So if they are not within those variances and you're late for something, then Nicole weigh in. But it's important that they tell you what they can do and you write it down, because you need to know so that you can know what your lead times are to sell your product. Go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can go very deep on the contract world. I don't know how helpful that is for you guys, but having service level agreement, so very specific, which is an SLA, you may know about that, having very specific expectations and clear parameters, having there be penalties or exit options for when things are not going right. I don't know, Brooke, I feel like you would maybe have some thoughts on this. This is something that we've worked on many times together before.
Sure. Hi, everybody. In addition to acting as COO for Fixer Advisory Group with Nicole and Jelina, I'm also a former general counsel, and I've done a lot of commercial work in similar areas for retail fashion brands. And it's really a challenge, Lisa, because to Jelina's point, you absolutely must do the due diligence, work, the requirements and requests stemming from that due diligence into a contract. But the reality is that if they break the contract, if they're not able to actually produce and show up with the product that you've gone ahead and maybe marketed or taken orders from, you're really in a tough spot. And so the hope is that if you come forward with a robust enough contract, SLA, you can tell in the negotiation process where there are sticking points. If it all seems a little bit too easy, maybe that's a sign that you need to dig a little deeper. I always recommend getting references from other brands that have used a particular supplier. Again, it's not foolproof because certainly they're going to provide their best and brightest examples. So there could be other ways for you to investigate maybe who's used them, and say, actually, can I talk to this one or can I talk to that one? Because you want to do as much upfront work so that you're not caught flat-footed. Even with the best contract, if you're trying to get a product out to market, you don't want to be then litigating with a former supplier that you didn't even go with. So as much upfront information as you can do, as much word of mouth in terms of, even coming to groups like this and getting recommendations for suppliers and other vendors that are relevant to your industry goes a really long way, because somebody that's building reputation wants to keep it positive.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you're finding the cheapest option, it might not be the best option. And then you have to weigh, what's more important in the long run. So those are just some practical tips. And absolutely, an ironclad contract, you always want it. But when you weigh sort of the practicalities of where you're left at the end of the day, a lot of that advanced work is going to take you farther towards your end goal of actually getting the product out, it being manufactured properly, shipped on time, and all that good stuff.
And also be really passionate about the BOM of your product, so the bill of materials. Have it really, obviously there's a formula card, and Nicole and Brooke can weigh in, that's the IP of your business. But that BOM of the product is going to really, as you're passionate and you're digging deeper, is going to really open up an entire window of like, oh my gosh, this ingredient comes from here. Well, it costs this much. Well, how much of this ingredient are they keeping in-house? Oh, these pumps, these caps, whatever you're selling, I'm going a little too detailed. Oh, this specific packaging. So there's the more information you have, and the more the more you're able to discover, the more you'll know exactly, like you'll be able to see it ahead of time that they're not going to hit that deadline, and you could be on them. And then the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Well, I would look forward to fabulous supplier references for technology-enabled products, because this was devastating. emotionally to run into this. And yeah, grateful it was before we launched, but still just
Right.
I mean, in the corner for a couple weeks. Then we got the fires. I'm in LA. Yay! So it's just been like, okay, how do we keep going?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question, Megan.
Yeah.
I actually popped it into the chat and I was like, you know what? We're all CPG people. Let's like crowdsource this because I know nobody knows for sure. Well, I don't know, but maybe like some people have heard some things. And so I think it's all gonna, for any of us that work with China manufacturers, you know, have any kind of China, we're all, you know, I'm just so worried it's gonna be like 120% tariff. Like, yeah, basically it would double. So I'd love to hear if anyone has any knowledge more than I do. Yeah.
What I noticed, and I'll go first if it's all right. What I noticed during COVID, obviously some of the tariffs changed, and then also the price of containers changed. You know, if at some point the price of container was like $28,000 when it should have really been 4,000. Is that partnering up with your supplier in China is really important. So as you understand what the tariffs are, going back to them and asking for an additional discount on that original price that they gave you so that everyone is winning is really important because they too want to keep your business. You know, they're your partner. They want you to succeed and they don't want you to go anywhere else. So there's going to be a lot of hand holding during this process, but your best bet is to go back to your suppliers and ensure that, you know, once you know what that cost is, to see if, to see if they can find that cost in their manufacturing as well.
Agreed. However, for like 25, 26 planning, right? I don't know if my costs are going to double,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if I should be planning another 60% and, you know, adjust margins, et cetera, and targets for profitability.
Well,
Yeah.
so the way you want to think about it
Yeah.
is, the original costs, right? And you know, I don't know how much time we have left, but the original cost is by the time you touch that product, right, has been marked up about 4 times.
Mhm.
So once you talk to your supplier, then your supplier talks to their supplier. So that 60% of 0 is 0, 60% of 1 is 60. So you want to be able to really dig deeper and go all the way to the source and have these conversations so that so that 60% is not a 60% like hit, is a lot less. And that's how that's how I would think about it. And we did the same with the container costs. When they started to happen, we got really nerdy with like the packaging where they would not put it in boxes. They would actually put it in these like plastic bags. So that it would literally load up a container and then they would give us a discount. So everyone was kind of
You guys
pitching.
worked it out. Okay. So you netted, even though you're being charged another, I don't know, what, 30, 40% in
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm just worried because, you know, this government, sorry, political commentary, but like it's chaotic, right? This incoming. And so I'm just worried, like, okay, is it going to be 60% like Q2 by Q2, you know, and another 80% by close of year? If
I mean,
this crystal ball. Yeah.
I think what we're seeing and talking to people about is the fact, I mean, to Jelina's point, you literally thinking about how can you be more efficient, cut costs, being scrappy, digging in, being creative with solutions, having them identified, including having alternative production sources.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is a pretty big theme that we're hearing is even if you're not, maybe you have something ready to go in another country or looking at other options in the event that it goes over a certain level and it just becomes, you know, not viable. So I think there's a few different, nobody knows, you know,
Right.
I think is the answer, but for right now. But I think what everyone we're talking to is doing is really thinking creatively. You've got to be a creative problem solver about it so that you can be prepared for various different scenarios. And looking for alternative manufacturing, looking for alternatives in terms of where you can go. And I think Jelina makes a really good point. I mean, the suppliers in China, they're business people too. Like they're going to have to eat some of the, if there's an increased tariff that's significant,
Right.
in addition to passing some of it onto the customer, you eating some of it, them eating some of it. I mean, it's going to eat into everyone's pocket if you're going to continue working with them. But they should want to continue working with you, presumably, and so they should be willing to share a part of that burden. So I think that's, given where we are right this minute, with this lack of certainty, which is really unsettling and difficult, knowing that exploring alternatives needs to be a really high priority.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll tell you, hedging, like you need to hedge you need to understand your forecast, and you got to hedge, like with Chinese New Year, we hedge in July, like what we're going to need to have, basically April through June, right? So being able to kind of hedge your business and understand what you need so you could place your orders before the tariffs, like that's going to be also like a tool that you could use. But like Nicole said, like start literally from the source, that bomb, like literally pick it up where, like, if it's packaging, where the beads are being purchased, in Shanghai, and that all the way to like what you're selling it to the customer. And little by little, you'll see that your EBITDA doesn't need to get affected. It's not just your EBITDA on the line, it's everyone's EBITDA that needs to get affected because we're in it together.
Thanks, guys.
I don't know if anyone else has any questions, or Brian, if you want to jump in.
Yes, no, that's just what I was about to do. This has been such a fantastic discussion. I didn't want to, cut it off before it was done. Thank you so much for coming and sharing this knowledge and all of these insights. This was really, really interesting.